In Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, a powerful movement of protesters gathered in the streets of Madureira, uniting to denounce the recent wave of police violence that has left devastating consequences for the city's marginalized communities. This march, coming just weeks after a particularly brutal police operation in two favela complexes, highlights the ongoing and deepening tensions between the authorities and the residents of these areas, largely composed of black and impoverished individuals. The protests followed an operation in October, which resulted in the tragic loss of at least 2 lives and a shocking toll on both the police and the civilians involved. Local authorities reported that 117 suspected criminals and 4 police officers lost their lives during a violent raid that has only intensified the calls for justice. Amidst the sea of demonstrators, with chants echoing through the streets, signs held high demanded not only an end to police brutality, but also the resignation of Governor Claudio Castro, whose policies have been fiercely criticized by activists and community leaders alike. They carried messages such as Governor Claudio Castro out and an end to the massacres in the favelas. The atmosphere was heavy with emotion, as this march wasn't just a protest, it was a cry for help and a plea for recognition of the systemic violence and inequality faced by the marginalized people of Rio. In the midst of the protest, Luna Normandi, a two-year-old activist, took a moment to share her thoughts on why this march was so important. Speaking passionately, Luna explained that the 14th Periphery March, as it is called, comes on the heels of the largest massacre in the history of Rio de Janeiro. She described how this massacre, which unfolded just weeks earlier, had deeply impacted the community. We organised this march with the slogan, "End the Massacre," she said, because what we see now is the deepening extermination of black and poor people in the favelas. These words resonate with the harsh realities faced by the residents of these areas. In Rio, the favelas are home to a large percentage of the city's black population, and they have long been the target of heavy-handed police operations. The sense of impunity among officers has allowed for a cycle of violence, which for many seems unbreakable. The march, which was not only a form of protest but also a statement of resilience, echoed the demand for change and for an end to the brutality that has long defined life in the favelas. For Dulce Antares, a 8-year-old history teacher, this day wasn't just a march, it was a moment of remembrance, of honouring the struggle that has been ongoing for generations. She reflected on the profound impact of this violence on the black community in Brazil, especially in the context of a system that continues to marginalise people of colour. It's a day to remember this struggle and recognise that black people still suffer. She said it's important to criticise Governor Claudio Castro's death-driven policy, which only aims at securing his re-election next year. Dulce's statement highlights the political undercurrents that often accompany such protests. The perception that violence in the favelas is being used as a political tool to bolster the image of the sitting governor in the run-up to the next election is a sentiment widely shared among activists. These policies, which target the very heart of poor and black communities, are seen as both a means of control and a way to maintain political power. The people in these communities, however, are no longer silent. They are speaking out against this unjust system, demanding that their voices be heard. In the crowd, Andre Nascimento dos Santos, a teacher who has been deeply involved in the struggle for education and equality in Brazil, also spoke out. His words were particularly poignant as he shared his concerns about the systemic violence and its broader implications for the future of Brazil's black population. He passionately declared, "We are in the streets to denounce this genocide against black people that the government is carrying out against our people." His words, heavy with sorrow and determination, encapsulated the overwhelming sentiment of the march. Andre continued by stressing that this protest was not only about resisting violence, but also about asserting the fundamental rights of black people to have access to opportunities that have long been denied to them. That's why this November protest in Madureira is so important, he said, to show that black people want to live, want to be part of education, want to enter university, want to be in the city and the countryside. We surf in. Deserve this. Enough of the genocide of our people. His call for equality and justice reverberated across the crowd as people marched together in solidarity. They were not just protesting the violence, they were demanding a seat at the table, a chance for their children to receive an education, to thrive in a society that has long ignored their needs. The march was a declaration of life, of dignity, and of a future in which the people of the favelas could stand proud, free from the oppression that has so long marked their existence. The images from that day were powerful. The protesters, resolute in their conviction, continued their march through the streets of Madureira, their faces painted with determination. The sounds of their chants filled the air as they moved together, one step at a time, in pursuit of justice. The streets of Rio de Janeiro, once a backdrop for violence and division, now became a symbol of resistance. As the marchers made their way through the neighbourhood, the sense of unity was palpable. There was no turning back now. The message was clear. The people of Rio de Janeiro would no longer tolerate the systemic violence and repression that has plagued their communities. This was not just a protest for today, it was a fight for a better tomorrow, for a future where the children of the favelas could grow up in peace, with opportunities, dignity, and the freedom to live without fear. The march concluded as the protesters gathered in a central square where leaders spoke out about the need for systemic change. They called on the government to end the police operations that have led to so many senseless deaths and to instead focus on the root causes of violence in the favelas: poverty, inequality, and lack of access to education. They demanded that Governor Claudio Castro take responsibility for the violence and work toward a policy of peace and justice for all people in Rio de Janeiro, particularly the black and poor communities that have suffered the most. This march was a call for justice, a plea for change, and a reminder that the struggle for equality and human dignity is far from over. The people of Rio de Janeiro, especially those from the favelas, are not backing down. They are demanding a future where their lives matter, a future where they can live without the constant threat of violence from the very people who are supposed to protect them. This march and the words of Luna, Dulce and Andre serve as a stark reminder of the ongoing fight for justice in Brazil and the resilience of those who continue to stand up for their rights, no matter the cost.
É uma luta contra o genocídio, porque hoje que coloca os nossos jovens,
matam as nossas juventudes, todas as vezes em que entram na escola e não tem direito à água. Eu sou do município. Vamos juntos, camaradas, em unidade, agora, soltando bomba branca, mas quando mata 20 pobres, 20 negros, é efeito colateral que aumentou o encarceramento da população negra. Com o governo Lula, está privatizando o privado também, qualquer governo burguês que queira nos atacar. Por isso é importante uma unidade de classe, uma medida para controlar tudo que é produzido no Brasil. Quem produz para a riqueza aqui é o povo negro.
Há séculos que existiu um Eldorado negro no Brasil, aonde viva Palmares. Quem vai falar agora?
Today, we are taking part in the 14th Periphery March, happening just weeks after the largest massacre in the history of Rio de Janeiro. We organised this march with the slogan, "End the Massacre," because what we see now is the deepening extermination of black and poor people in the favelas. It's a day to remember this struggle and recognise that black people still suffer. It's important to criticise Governor of Rio de Janeiro, Claudio Castro's death-driven policy, which only aims at securing his re-election next year. We are in the streets to denounce this genocide against black people that the government is carrying out against our people. That's why this November protest in Madureira is so important, to show that black people want to live, want to be part of education, want to enter university, want to be in the city and the countryside. We deserve this. Enough of the genocide of our people.